Cheers.
Cheers.
Loyalty to the wrong person can end in tragedy. A devoted girlfriend does her lover's dirty work.
She was her own little factory of horrors.
A manipulative mom recruits her own daughter to kill.
She was exactly what I knew she was the first day I laid eyes on her, pure evil.
And a lovesick woman teams up for a murder spree.
When they meet, the violence and the bloodshed increases tenfold. Together, they're super killers.
Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. In late 2015, 33-year-old single mom, Sonia Wiedenfelder, makes a tentative return to the dating world.
Everyone described Sonia as very polite, very quiet, very demure.
She just looked like your average all-American girl.
A dating app brings 41-year-old phone technician Rick Spalding
Sonia.
into her life.
Hi.
Hey.
I don't know how much experience Sonia had at dating, but when she met Rick, she was a little over her head.
Looking good.
Thank you.
Sonia's life was progressing in a normal fashion. Drink.
Yes, please.
2, please. Until she encountered Rick.
It's been a long time since I've had a shot.
No time like the present.
On their very first date,
Cheers.
Cheers.
Sonia falls under Rick's spell.
Oh, wow.
Rick was very good at speaking to people and kind of being very engaging, very personable.
You and I are going to get along just fine. It's going to be a good night.
Rick, I'm home.
They started seeing each other, and then from there they became a little more serious. Eventually, Rick moved in with Sonia.
Hey, in the bedroom.
Sonia soon learns that she's not the only woman. But Rick's special breed of charm has no power over one ex-lover. He's in a bitter legal battle with 39-year-old Debbie Morgan for custody of their 11-year-old son.
She was a child welfare worker. She was working on her master's degree. She was specializing in working with children who had suffered trauma.
Hey, Tiger.
Hi, Dad. I'll see you Tuesday. Love you.
All she wanted from Rick was a little financial assistance.
Hey, Rick. Your payments haven't come through again.
Rick owes Debbie $10,000 in unpaid child support.
Here we go again.
What do you mean, here we go? I need to...
Why are you doing this to me?
Rick couldn't pay any child support. He wasn't able to hold a job.
He's your son, too.
I know he's my son. You get your money. Just back off and leave me alone.
According to Debbie's father, Carl Grace, Rick has also stopped trying to find a job.
We believe he just didn't want to pay the child support. He didn't want to do anything that would help Debbie.
With Rick out of work, Sonia is the sole breadwinner.
Sonia was the one who was working. Rick was staying with her, and she appeared to be fronting a lot of the bills.
Sonia doesn't blame Rick for the situation.
It's hopeless. Debbie's out to destroy me.
Instead, they unite against a common enemy.
He's saying that if Debbie was causing all their problems, that they would be so much better off if Debbie weren't around.
And she began to believe, okay, our life was doing great, and then now it's spiraling down because of Deborah Morgan.
Soon, Sonia is a willing volunteer in Rick's increasingly bitter battle.
How about this?
Now you're talking.
We can post these all through her neighborhood.
Sweet little Sonia had her own ideas of how to deal with the custody issue.
And I've got another idea.
She was her own little factory of horrors.
Yes, hello. I'd like to report an unfit mother. Debbie Morgan? That's right, yes. No, I'd like to stay anonymous.
Sonia tried to get Debbie in trouble and tried to get her fired from her job.
Yes, neglect, child neglect.
But yeah, we were shocked when we heard that Sonia was involved.
That's correct.
From filing claims against her at her office to circulating flyers throughout the neighborhood to try to smear her name.
Everything to make sure that Deborah Morgan was seen as a villain, seen as some kind of demon.
Rick even targets Debbie with constant phone calls at work.
Please leave me alone.
The relentless campaign begins to take a toll.
Deborah was scared of Rick.
Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm sorry about that.
You want to take any time off?
No. It'll all be over in a couple of weeks.
Alrighty then.
She told one of her friends, if something ever happens to me,
But Rhonda, if I end up dead,
it was because of Rick. Look to Rick.
go look for Rick.
That should have been it. Pack the car, grab the kid, leave town.
In 2016, Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Rick and Sonia's Dirty Tricks campaign against Debbie has failed to turn the custody battle in his favor. The legal fight has left him broke, and he's taking Sonia down with him.
That's it. There's nothing left.
The house is in foreclosure. I've sold the car. I have nothing left.
She was draining her 401k, draining her savings, and now their house was in foreclosure because Sonia was trying to help Rick.
But the worst is yet to come.
It was beginning to look like he might go to jail as a deadbeat dad.
And I'm going to jail.
Rick is out of money and out of excuses. His next court date is set for November 8th, 2016. If he doesn't pay the owed child support, he's facing 6 months in jail.
He was telling people Debbie was trying to put him in jail.
And that was looming over Rick's head. They viewed this as doomsday.
And there's only one person to blame.
If they got rid of Debbie, their life would be blissful. That all their problems would go away and everything would be great.
You know, if only Debbie would disappear.
I believe that Rick put that idea to kill Deborah in Sonia's head.
This was something that, Rick was trying to manipulate her into doing.
I have an idea.
She told Rick that I have an idea, and it will be concrete, and it will solve their problems.
Well, you don't mean what I think you mean.
Yeah.
You can't be serious.
What are our options?
I think Rick manipulated her, but her heart was in it.
In the early hours of November 7th, the day before Rick is due in court,
She stood on this side, and the shotgun would have been put right up to her face.
It was one shot at point blank range.
I don't know why she was so enraged that she could do such a thing.
Sonia's cruelty doesn't stop there.
I can't understand why a person would let a child, why she would let him find her like that. It is beyond my comprehension.
She let that happen.
Suspicion immediately falls on Rick.
They wanted to know if we knew of anybody that might want to harm Debbie. And we told them we knew one person.
But when investigators examine Rick's phone, they find a new prime suspect. Rick has secretly been recording conversations that depict Sonia as a cold-blooded killer.
Rick wanted that information in case we started looking at him.
So, tell me more.
This weekend. What about then?
So we would realize that he didn't kill her, but Sonia did.
Rick was talking to her about, have you ever heard anything a day in your life?
You've never killed anything in your life. I mean, try killing a cat. You'll see it's not so easy.
Sonia's response was, the cats don't deserve it.
Kat doesn't deserve it. But Debbie does.
A jury finds Sonia Weidenfelder and Rick Spaulding equally culpable. Both are convicted of first-degree murder. In 2018, they are sentenced to life in prison. No chance of parole until 2063.
When we heard the verdict, we felt that a burden had been lifted. They really were going to get what they deserved.
You got a little something here.
In the name of love, Sonia was willing to sacrifice Deborah's life. A devoted mother who had a beautiful future ahead.
She didn't have any remorse for what she did. I think that she did that with the thought that that was the right thing to do.
Sonia wanted Rick at all cost. And she wanted him without any encumbrances. And Debbie was an encumbrance. Jealousy isn't always between love rivals. It can be between family members. A lifetime of domination and control by an evil woman.
Henrico, Virginia, 2014. A family mourns the tragic death of a wife and mother. For years, Karina Coles battles chronic pain. But in 2014, her fight is over.
My mom overdosed off her pain medication.
Her death devastates her 17-year-old son, Martre.
Martre had ended up graduating on the day that my mother passed. So that day was very emotional.
All right, come on in, make yourselves at home.
Their father, Maurice, isn't coping with her death.
Martre, get out here.
Here, Pop.
I want you to meet some people. This is Denise.
But his co-worker, 45-year-old Denise Gay, is more than eager to comfort him.
Denise had her eye on Maurice Coles for some time, but knew that he was married. But as soon as his wife passed, Denise saw that as her chance to be the shoulder for Maurice to lean on.
Denise convinces Maurice to let her and her 11-year-old daughter move in.
She was determined to move in. I couldn't understand why. Why are you so eager to be with someone who just lost their spouse? It was definitely too quick. I told my father it was too quick.
This is LaToya.
Denise's oldest daughter, LaToya, helps with the move. But this is one blended family that is not a good mix.
Come on, let's help these ladies with these bags and take them to their rooms. This way, Mom.
Mama done good.
Denise resents any memories of Maurice's late wife.
He had large photos of my mom in the home.
She was all over the home.
Well, this has got to go.
I felt like Denise was jealous.
Denise wants to remove all traces of Maurice's wife, including son Martre.
He was very talented. Had his art exhibited in school and shows and things like that.
Martrey Coles. This is a chance to live your dream.
Denise becomes a doting stepmom and encourages Martrey to go back to school.
Denise became an ally to Martrey and said she wanted to help him get into art school, to a school in Florida.
You do know Florida's 700 miles away, right?
Yeah, of course.
Can't be bringing your laundry here every weekend.
He felt like Denise was being a mother figure to him. Of course, his mother passed, so he was looking for that kind of love.
Ready to hit send?
Absolutely.
Great.
She was helping him and was going to help pay for his education. Things couldn't have been better. Getting him to come down for a tour. He was over the moon.
Thanks to you.
Hey, your talent got you in.
He felt like Denise was really going to help him succeed in life.
There is one unusual requirement for the art school tour. Martrey must make a mask of his own face.
This woman, Sheila Crenshaw, told Martrey that this is something he had to do for his application to the school.
The project becomes a family affair.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's looking good.
Denise recruits her 21-year-old daughter, LaToya, to help.
Martrey was very excited about making this mask as part of his application.
Martrey sees this as his ticket to a bright future. March 12th, 2017. 19-year-old Martrey Cole's dream of going to art school has come true. But before he can enroll, he disappears.
So, here it is. Looks just like him, doesn't it?
Denise was saying how he was there earlier and him and her had made a mask.
Okay, so after he finished with the mask, what did he do?
He said, I'm going to Michelle's to get my wallet.
I didn't believe not one word that came out of her mouth at this time.
The paper imprint of his face is the only trace of Martrey they find in the house.
The mask was like a paper mache of Trey's face. That didn't sit well with me at all. Yeah, I didn't like the mask.
You tried.
Hey.
She tried to put it on me and Michelle, and we backed up.
Denise's behavior makes the sisters suspicious.
She was extremely friendly, and I'm looking up like, that's weird. She don't ever talk to Michelle. I noticed LaToya quickly grabbed her things. She headed straight towards the door and left.
And her chatty younger sister is unusually quiet and sullen.
I think we should call the police.
Yeah.
Don't be ridiculous.
I was like, well, if he doesn't come back tonight, I will be contacting authorities.
The sisters file a missing persons report. 3 weeks later, their worst fears come true. Martrey's body is discovered, dumped in a wooded area just out of town.
He was in a box, and he was put in there in such a way, almost like an accordion, with his hands behind his back.
I was mind blown. I was disgusted, angry, hurt. I felt my heart literally break in half. I just don't understand.
The body is strangely exposed, and detectives think the killer may have only half finished the job. On a hunch, they remove Martrey's body, but set up a camera in case the killer returns. They also look into Martre's art school application.
Sheila Crenshaw, please. No? What about in the past?
They discover something very odd.
She doesn't exist.
So, who's sending all those emails?
We were able to find the computer IP addresses to know that it was really Denise Gay who created this fictitious person and created an email identity as Sheila Crenshaw.
Denise? That's why she was helping him.
The amount of planning and execution that Denise went through, it was so elaborate.
And the police's hunch pays off. The hidden camera captures the killer returning to the scene.
We were 100% confident that the person in that image was in fact Denise Gay.
The police were watching the entire spectacle.
The police have a body and evidence of Denise's phony emails.
Looking good.
Then an unlikely witness tells exactly how Martre died.
She described how she was able to see through the door of his room.
No.
It's okay. I'm not gonna put it over your mouth.
That mass was described as not having any ability to breathe through.
How you doing in there, Trey? Trey?
And she could see her mother and her sister on top of Martre.
Go back to your room.
He was screaming for his life. She described how she saw his feet kicking in the air, how he was grasping for breath, how he was begging for them to get off of him.
When he said, get off me, it probably was the last breath he had in him.
And it is a few minutes later where she peeks out and she sees this container.
Go to your room. Go.
And we know now that Martre Coles' body was actually inside that container.
Ultimately, she was the key to solving this case.
The 13-year-old is the star witness for the prosecution. Denise and LaToya Gay stand trial for conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder. They are found guilty on both counts.
The best that we could theorize for the jury was that he was simply in her way. And a constant reminder to Maurice of his beloved wife who died.
She wanted to be the only important person in Maurice's life. That meant Martre had to go.
In 2018, LaToya receives a total of 30 years behind bars. Martre's sisters have mixed feelings.
My heart really went out to LaToya and her sister, that they were raised by a master manipulator. I'm truly sorry that both of them were put in that predicament by such a selfish woman.
The mastermind, Denise Gay, is sentenced to life in prison. And in the state of Virginia, life means life.
Denise is exactly what I knew she was the first day I laid eyes on her, pure evil.
Fortunately, Denise is never going to have the opportunity to commit another murder outside of prison. But if I were her cellmate, I wouldn't turn my back on her. Some women like guys that are straight arrows, kind, loving, no problems. And some women are attracted to bad boys.
You never know where you'll meet the man of your dreams. For 37-year-old Mary Rice,
Morning.
it's in a Florida prison yard.
Billy and Mary met when she went to visit her brother in jail. Mary told Billy that when he got out, he would always have a place with her.
Didn't recognize you without the orange jumpsuit.
When he's released in 2016, that's exactly where Billy Boyette heads.
I sure enough recognize you. For my dreams.
Mary was swept off of her feet by a convicted felon, then had done prison time.
Mary was fully aware that Billy had a long history of domestic violence with girlfriends and wives, and she still wanted him.
She knew exactly who Billy was, and yet she dove right in.
By intimidating his victims into dropping the charges.
How bad?
We'll go back in.
Sit down.
With a warrant out for his arrest, Billy is ready to run. Mary can't let that happen.
Miss Alicia might not show up to court.
Mary insisted that he take care of Alicia, meaning get rid of her. At one point saying, if you don't, I will.
Mary has her own reasons for wanting Alicia dead.
As far as she was concerned, well, she had just figured out a way to get rid of a rival.
No matter what, she was going to be with Billy. And she wasn't going to let any other female stand in the way of that.
The last time Alicia's father, Wayne, sees her, she's living in fear.
You could tell she was scared, and so anyway, so you could tell she was scared and didn't know what to do.
What are you doing?
Changing vehicles.
She just happened to be driving home from work early that morning, just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
They followed her to her residence.
Follows her into the driveway. The woman gets out of her car, starts walking up to her door.
Billy, he just walked up to her and shot her in the head.
Miss Braz was shot directly in the center of her face.
It wasn't necessary to kill Peggy to get her car. She would have certainly given it up, no problem. But why stop now?
Authorities have no idea that Mary is the driving force behind the killing spree.
It was up in the air on whether she was a participant or whether she was actually being held against her will by Billy Boyette.
You know, they think I'm your hostage.
You are.
Maybe you're mine.
Mary gets off on this. She's getting a thrill out of this. It's almost like a drug. They're killing people together. They have this bond now, this bond in blood.
Early February 2017, authorities are in pursuit of Mary Rice and Billy Boyette. 4 days in, the deadly road trip comes to an abrupt halt.
Damn. We got a flat tire. I'm pulling over.
They had a flat on Peggy Braz's vehicle, and they had to pull over.
And so they were kind of stranded.
Now Now what?
Go. Embrace nature.
Billy and Mary were camping out in the woods to avoid detection.
Two days later, the killers strike again.
They realized that they needed another car. So as they were coming out of the wooded area, they came across Kayla Crocker's home.
28-year-old single mom, Kayla Crocker, is home alone with her 18-month-old son.
Billy grabs her, and he kind of drags her into the house. Mary then ties this woman up, ties her arms and legs tightly.
Please, I won't do her. I don't believe you. She's all yours.
No, please, 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 please don't hurt me.
Her 18-month-old child was actually in his crib in the same room.
In front of this 18-month-old child, Billy puts the weapon up to her temple and blows her head off.
Please, I won't do her.
Do it.
Once again, Billy and Mary killed an innocent and probably cooperative victim. They wanted her car. They took her life.
For 8 days across 3 states, Mary and Billy leave a trail of death and heartbreak. They also leave a wealth of evidence for the cops in pursuit.
They've been leaving behind credit card receipts, forensic evidence, cars parked on the side of the road, and dead bodies.
Unaware the net is closing. In West Point, Georgia, they check into a motel to lay low.
This is West Point PD.
SWAT teams begin to surround Billy and Mary.
What are we gonna do?
The standoff lasts for almost 3 hours.
What are you doing?
We're screwed, babe. It's over.
Oh dear.
They made one last call and asked them to come out and surrender.
You go first.
No, I'm not going without you. No.
Tell them I threatened to kill you. I'll be right behind you.
Mary opened up the door to the hotel room and exited the hotel room and surrendered to law enforcement.
Within a few seconds of her walking out, law enforcement heard a gunshot.
And that's Billy. Billy just killed himself.
Billy probably shot himself because he didn't want to give the SWAT team the satisfaction of killing him.
Under interrogation, Mary creates a whole new version of events.
That basically she was doing everything that she did because he made her or because she was being held against her will.
Is that gonna fly with a jury? Hell no.
CCTV tells the same story everywhere they stopped.
At no point did Mary ever say she needed help or act like she needed help.
She had every opportunity to stop this madness and these killings from happening. She was, in fact, a willing participant.
In 2018, Mary Rice is convicted of the first-degree murder of Kayla Crocker and of being accessory to the murders of Alicia Greer and Jacqueline Moore. She's serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole.
There's bad, evil women involved in murder. And then there's very bad, very evil women for whom murder is not enough. Mary Rice is one of those.
These deadly women didn't act alone.
The call comes in before sunrise, the kind of hour when the world still feels unfinished, when shadows linger longer than they should, and the mind is most vulnerable to questions it can't silence. A technician stands alone in a lab that smells faintly of disinfectant and old paper, staring at a monitor that refuses to blink away what it's showing. Numbers align. Sequences match. After 26 years of silence, the California 1996 cold case exhales, not with relief, but with a sharp, cutting breath that feels more like a warning than a resolution. Somewhere, far from the glow of fluorescent lights, a community that learned how to live with not knowing is about to be shaken awake. Back then, the street looked ordinary. Too ordinary. A row of houses baked by the afternoon sun, trimmed lawns, mailboxes leaning slightly from years of routine contact. The kind of place where neighbors recognized cars before faces, where nothing ever seemed urgent enough to remember. Until one evening when police lights painted the asphalt red and blue, and a name began circulating in whispers that never quite stopped. Missing. Then found. Then labeled with a word that froze time. Unsolved. A cold case before anyone understood how cold it would become. The victim's life was reduced to fragments almost immediately. A last phone call. A half-finished errand. A routine day that ended without explanation. Detectives walked the perimeter, notebooks open, eyes scanning for something out of place, anything that didn't belong. But the scene offered no confession. No dramatic trail. Just the quiet defiance of a crime that had learned how to hide in plain sight. Evidence was collected, bagged, logged with care that felt almost ceremonial, as if precision alone could summon truth. It didn't. Days turned into weeks, weeks into years, and the case slid slowly into that deep archival drawer where questions are stored instead of answered. The town adjusted the way towns always do. Memorials faded. Conversations shifted. New families moved in, unaware of the history embedded beneath their footsteps. But for those who stayed, the absence lingered. It showed up in cautious glances, in doors locked a little earlier at night, in the way certain streets were avoided without anyone quite remembering why. The cold case became part of the landscape, a quiet rumor that refused to leave, a reminder that some endings never arrive. Investigators came and went. Fresh eyes tried fresh angles. Witnesses were re-interviewed, their memories already blurring at the edges, softened by time, sharpened by imagination. Each statement carried uncertainty like static, enough to distract, but never enough to clarify. Suspects emerged, dissolved, re-emerged under different lights, none of them holding long enough to matter. The file thickened, then stagnated. The case went cold not because no one cared, but because caring without answers is exhausting. Years later, science began whispering promises. DNA databases grew quietly, steadily, indifferent to patience or frustration. Samples once considered useless were re-examined, their potential rediscovered by machines that didn't forget and didn't guess. Evidence slept in storage, sealed and silent, waiting for technology to catch up with its secrets. And then one morning it did. A match appeared where there had only been noise. Not a guess, not a theory. A statistical certainty that snapped the past into the present with terrifying clarity. The news traveled fast through official channels and even faster through memory. Detectives who had long since learned not to hope felt something shift behind their ribs. Not relief, tension. Because a breakthrough doesn't erase the years before it, it drags them back into the light. Every decision, every overlooked detail, every assumption made under pressure suddenly demanded re-examination. The cold case wasn't just solved. It was reopened in the minds of everyone who had ever touched it. Questions returned with force. How had this been missed? Who had been trusted too easily? What had been dismissed because it didn't fit? The DNA didn't answer these questions. It intensified them, because certainty in one place exposed uncertainty everywhere else. The suspect identified by the match was not a stranger to the story, but not its center either. A name that had appeared once, briefly, then vanished beneath louder theories. Now it resurfaced, heavier, undeniable. As word spread, the community reacted not with celebration, but shock. Some felt vindicated. Others felt betrayed. The story they had told themselves for decades fractured, replaced by a version that felt unfamiliar and unsettling. Closure, they realized, was not the same as peace. The cold case had shaped them, taught them how to live with unanswered questions. An answer, arriving this late, felt invasive, almost unwelcome. In interrogation rooms, voices stayed calm, controlled, rehearsed. Time had taught everyone how to perform normalcy. But beneath the surface, something was unraveling. The suspect's past was dissected, timelines rebuilt, movements traced with a precision that hadn't been possible before. Old alibis weakened under new scrutiny. Statements, once accepted, without challenge, now sounded hollow. The case that had slept for decades began to pulse with urgency, every revelation tightening the air. And yet, even as the evidence pointed forward, something pulled backward. A lingering sense that this story was larger than a single name, a single arrest, a single scientific triumph. Cold cases don't just hide perpetrators. They hide complicity, silence, fear. They hide the reasons people looked away. As investigators pushed ahead, they felt it too, that uneasy awareness that solving the case might not end it. It might only expose how much had been buried alongside the truth. The DNA breakthrough stunned investigators, but it didn't quiet the room. It made it louder. Louder with memories. Louder with doubt. Louder with the realization that the past, once awakened, does not return to sleep easily. The California 1996 cold case had spoken at last, and its voice was not offering comfort. It was demanding to be heard, all the way through, no matter what it revealed, no matter who it unsettled, no matter how long the echo lasted. The arrest doesn't come with sirens screaming or cameras flashing at first. It arrives quietly, almost respectfully, like the system itself is afraid of disturbing what it has resurrected. A knock on a door that has been opened 1,000 times before, without consequence. A name spoken aloud that once meant nothing more than a footnote. Now it carries weight, gravity, the kind that bends every conversation around it. The suspect looks older than anyone remembers, face carved by years that were never supposed to circle back to this moment. Time has not absolved him. It has preserved him. Inside the department, the mood shifts from cautious optimism to something darker, more complex. Solving a cold case is never clean. It's a reckoning. Detectives pull the old files again, pages yellowed, edges curled, handwriting from another era staring back at them like an accusation. Notes once dismissed now feel radioactive. Why was this lead dropped? Why was that witness never recontacted? Why did this name fade so easily? The DNA match is definitive, but it opens wounds the badge cannot cover. The suspect's timeline is reconstructed piece by piece, not from memory, but from records. Pay stubs, utility bills, transit logs, forgotten paperwork that never imagined it would one day testify. His life after 1996 appears painfully ordinary. Jobs held, relationships formed and dissolved, holidays celebrated, children raised. The idea that all of this unfolded while the cold case lingered unresolved sends a ripple of anger through the room. Justice delayed doesn't feel like justice. It feels like something stolen. Interviews begin again, this time with a different intensity. Former neighbors are tracked down, their voices older, their recollections fragile, but suddenly urgent. Some remember him as quiet, polite, unremarkable. Others hesitate, then admit there was always something off, a detail they ignored because it was easier to ignore than confront. These confessions come haltingly, wrapped in regret. The cold case didn't just freeze evidence. It froze conscience. The victim's family is notified in a small, controlled space where no one knows how to breathe properly. They've lived decades in a state of suspended grief, mourning without resolution, healing without answers. The news lands unevenly. Shock, disbelief, anger that burns hotter than relief ever could. The name of the suspect feels foreign on their tongues, disconnected from the monster they imagined for years. Closure, they realize, doesn't arrive as a moment. It arrives as a process, and it hurts. Media attention explodes once the arrest becomes public. Headlines scream about the cold case finally cracked, about DNA rewriting history, about justice catching up at last. But beneath the spectacle, there's unease. Commentators ask how a case like this could remain unsolved for so long. Armchair analysts dissect every move made in 1996 with the arrogance of hindsight. The department braces itself. Solving the case doesn't end scrutiny. It invites it. Inside the interrogation room, the suspect listens as the evidence is laid out. The DNA match. The probability so high it borders on certainty. The room is silent except for the hum of electricity, the faint reminder that time keeps moving forward, regardless of guilt or innocence. When he speaks, his voice is measured, almost calm. He denies. He deflects. He clings to old alibis like life rafts, even as they begin to sink under the weight of new verification. Detectives press harder, not with theatrics but with precision. They reference details no one else should know. They mention moments that never made it into the public record. The suspect's composure fractures briefly, just enough to be noticed. It's not a confession. It's a crack. In cold cases, cracks matter. They're where truth leaks out. Meanwhile, analysts re-examine the physical evidence with modern tools. Fibers once indistinguishable now tell stories. Trace elements align with locations long dismissed as irrelevant. The crime scene, frozen in reports and photographs, comes alive again under new interpretation. It reveals mistakes, not malicious ones, but human ones. Assumptions made under pressure. Patterns forced where none existed. The cold case didn't resist resolution out of malice. It resisted because it was misunderstood. As the case builds, so does the realization that this arrest is not the end of the story. Prosecutors understand the challenge ahead. Juries don't experience the slow burn of decades. They encounter evidence all at once, stripped of the emotional timeline investigators carry. Every gap, every delay, every lost opportunity will be weaponized by the defense. The cold case must now survive not just scrutiny, but skepticism. For the community, the revelation reopens old wounds. People revisit memories they thought were settled. Parents recall curfews imposed too late. Friends remember arguments about safety, about trust, about whether evil could exist so close to home. The solved cold case doesn't reassure them. It unsettles them. It proves that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it blends in, waits, grows old alongside you. Night after night, investigators stay late, driven not by policy, but by obligation. This case has followed them, even those who weren't there in 1996. It's inherited guilt, inherited responsibility. Solving it feels like repaying a debt, but with interest that can never be fully covered. Every step forward reminds them how long it took to get here. And beneath it all, a quiet, persistent question refuses to go away. If this case was solvable now with one breakthrough, one match, one advancement in science, how many others are still waiting? How many names are still sitting in boxes, attached to evidence that hasn't found its moment yet? The California 1996 cold case may be solved, but it casts a long shadow, stretching far beyond a single arrest, reminding everyone that the past is never truly past. It's just waiting for the right moment to return. The night after the interrogation, the building doesn't empty the way it usually does. Lights remain on in offices that should be dark, casting long reflections across polished floors. Coffee grows cold in paper cups. The California 1996 cold case has shifted from history to present tense, and no one inside the department is willing to be the first to walk away from it. This isn't momentum. It's gravity. Detectives replay the interview footage again and again, studying every pause, every breath, Every moment where the suspect's eyes drift just a fraction too long toward the table. There is no confession, but there is something else. Hesitation where certainty should live. In cold cases, hesitation is a language of its own. It speaks in fragments, in inconsistencies that only appear when pressure meets memory. The defense strategy begins to form almost immediately, predictable yet dangerous. They will argue contamination. They will question chain of custody. They will suggest coincidence dressed up as science. DNA, for all its power, is not immune to doubt when filtered through rhetoric. Prosecutors know this, and they prepare accordingly, building redundancy into every argument, reinforcing each conclusion with layers that don't rely on a single breakthrough. Back in the archives, a forgotten box is opened. Inside are cassette tapes from witness interviews conducted days after the crime, voices captured before time could soften them. The audio crackles, warped by age, but the urgency is still there. One witness mentions a car parked where it shouldn't have been. Another recalls footsteps, hurried, uneven, as if someone was running without knowing where to go. These details were logged, but never fully pursued. Not because they lacked value, but because the case had already chosen a direction back then, and everything else was pushed aside. The realization hits hard. The cold case didn't go unsolved because there was nothing to follow. It went unsolved because the wrong path felt right at the time. Confirmation bias, invisible and deadly, guided decisions for years without anyone naming it. Now, with fresh eyes, those old details glow with significance, like embers that never fully went out. The victim's final hours are reconstructed with forensic patience. Phone records map movements. Receipts timestamp ordinary moments that suddenly matter. A gas station camera, once too grainy to identify anything useful, now reveals posture, gait, a silhouette that aligns disturbingly well with the suspect's physical characteristics at the time. It's not proof on its own. It doesn't need to be. It just needs to belong. The suspect's family enters the picture reluctantly, dragged into a storm they never anticipated. Some cooperate. Others shut down completely, unable or unwilling to reconcile the person they knew with the allegations now dominating headlines. Their interviews are tense, emotionally charged, filled with contradictions that feel less like lies and more like self-preservation. Loving someone doesn't make you blind. It makes you careful about what you're willing to see. Outside the courthouse, the public narrative grows louder, harsher. Talk radio dissects the case with casual cruelty. Online forums transform fragments of evidence into absolute truths overnight. The cold case becomes entertainment, stripped of its human cost. Investigators try not to listen, but the noise seeps in anyway. It always does. A former detective from the original 1996 team is brought in for consultation. He's older now, slower, haunted in ways that don't show up in retirement photos. Sitting across from the new investigators, he doesn't defend the past. He explains it. The limitations, the pressure, the sense that time was an enemy back then, not an ally. DNA wasn't a savior yet. It was a theory. The room listens, not to excuse mistakes, but to understand them. Then comes the unexpected break. A witness who left the state years ago comes forward after seeing the arrest on the news. They hesitated for decades, convinced what they saw was too small, too uncertain. Memory is a fragile thing, especially when no one asks you to trust it. Now, with the case alive again, they speak. Their account doesn't rewrite the narrative. It sharpens it. The timeline tightens. Gaps close. The suspect's alibi, once accepted without challenge, begins to unravel under renewed verification. A coworker remembers a shift change that never happened. A logbook shows alterations that were never questioned. None of it is dramatic. That's what makes it devastating. The truth doesn't arrive screaming. It arrives quietly, stacking detail upon detail until denial collapses under its own weight. As trial preparations intensify, the emotional toll becomes unavoidable. Detectives carry the case home with them, replaying scenarios in their heads, imagining alternate outcomes, wondering how many lives might have been different if this had been solved sooner. These thoughts don't help the case, but they refuse to stay buried. Cold cases don't just demand answers. They demand accountability from everyone who touches them. The suspect, now fully aware of the storm closing in, shifts tactics. Cooperation becomes selective. Silence replaces deflection. His legal team tightens its grip, controlling access, shaping narrative. In the holding cell, time finally feels heavy to him. The decades he lived untouched now compress into a single, suffocating moment. The past has found him, and it's not interested in explanations. As the prosecution's case solidifies, one truth becomes unavoidable. Solving the California 1996 cold case is not about redemption. It's about recognition. Recognizing the victim. Recognizing the failures. Recognizing that justice doesn't age out, even when people do. The case is moving forward now, but it drags 30 years of silence behind it. A reminder that some answers come too late to heal, but never too late to matter. By the time dawn breaks, the case no longer belongs solely to the investigators. It spills into the streets, into morning news cycles, into whispered conversations at kitchen tables. The words California 1996 cold case solved are printed in bold, but inside the department, no one dares say the word solved out loud. Not yet. Not when the truth is still being assembled piece by piece, fragile as glass. The forensic lab becomes the quiet center of gravity. This is where certainty is manufactured, where chaos is filtered through protocol. Technicians rerun samples already tested, not because they doubt the results, but because doubt is what defense attorneys feed on. Swabs. Slides. Digital readouts glowing softly in darkened rooms. Every number must agree with every other number. Every margin of error must be documented, anticipated, neutralized. The DNA doesn't just point to a name. It points to a pattern. Analysts begin comparing it against other unsolved cases from the same era, crimes dismissed as unrelated decades ago. Different cities, different victims, similar signatures. The possibility hangs in the air, heavy and dangerous. If the pattern holds, this cold case is no longer an isolated tragedy. It's a doorway. Detectives revisit crime scenes long erased by time. Parking lots are now shopping centers. Empty fields are packed neighborhoods. But maps don't forget, and neither do coordinates. Standing in places where violence once unfolded, investigators describe what used to be there, narrating absence like it's evidence. The wind moves through spaces that once held screams no one heard. The victim's family is brought back into the process, step by painful step. They've lived for decades with unanswered questions, with anniversaries that reopen wounds without warning. Now they're asked to listen, to look, to absorb details that were once withheld in the name of ongoing investigation. There is relief, but it's cautious. Hope has burned them before. One family member asks a question no one wants to answer. Why now? There is no clean response. Technology advanced. Priorities shifted. Someone finally listened. Each explanation feels insufficient. The truth is harder. Justice didn't arrive earlier because it couldn't, or because it wasn't allowed to. Inside interrogation rooms, pressure builds again. The suspect is confronted with fragments of the growing case, not all at once, never fully. Investigators let silence do most of the work. Silence forces memory to fill the gaps. Sometimes with truth. Sometimes with mistakes. Either way, it reveals stress points. The suspect's posture changes. His voice tightens. He corrects details no one challenged. That's noted. The defense pushes back aggressively. Motions are filed questioning everything from sample storage temperatures to technician credentials. It's procedural warfare, slow and deliberate. Prosecutors respond in kind, confident but cautious. In a case this old, arrogance is a liability. A breakthrough arrives from an unexpected source, a former acquaintance of the suspect, someone who drifted out of his life shortly after 1996 and never looked back. They remember a sudden change in behavior. Nightmares. Paranoia. An obsession with news coverage of the case that didn't match casual interest. Back then, it felt odd. Now, it feels like context. Financial records surface. Small withdrawals. Unexplained expenses. Nothing criminal on its own, but enough to disrupt the narrative of an ordinary life untouched by violence. Patterns emerge, subtle but persistent, suggesting a man always running from something he never named. As the case tightens, investigators confront an uncomfortable reality. Solving this cold case doesn't restore what was lost. It rearranges the present. It forces people to rewrite their understanding of the past, to accept that evil didn't disappear, it waited. Public reaction fractures. Some celebrate the breakthrough as proof that justice endures. Others question the timing, the motives, the certainty. Social media amplifies every doubt, every conspiracy. Truth becomes contested territory, and investigators are forced to defend not just evidence, but process. Late one night, a detective sits alone reviewing photographs from the original file. Grainy images, blurred faces, a moment frozen forever in low resolution. He realizes something unsettling. The case was never cold. It was waiting for tools, waiting for courage, waiting for someone willing to disturb the quiet. As preparations for trial move forward, the atmosphere shifts again. This is no longer about discovery. It's about confrontation. The past is no longer content to stay buried, and the present is running out of ways to ignore it. The California 1996 cold case is alive now, breathing, demanding attention, and it won't be satisfied with anything less than the full, unbearable weight of the truth. The closer the case moves toward trial, the heavier the air becomes inside the building. Conversations lower in volume. Doors close more often. Every step now carries consequence. This is the phase where mistakes are fatal, not to lives, but to truth. One misfiled document, one poorly phrased question, and decades of waiting could collapse into reasonable doubt. The prosecution team rebuilds the narrative from the ground up, not trusting memory, not trusting instinct. They construct it the way engineers build bridges, assuming failure at every joint and reinforcing accordingly. Timelines are redrawn down to the minute. Phone pings are layered over traffic patterns from 1996. Weather reports are cross-referenced because rain changes footsteps, mud changes tire tracks, and juries remember details that feel real. The DNA evidence, once a single beam of light, is now surrounded by structure. Lab technicians prepare to testify, rehearsing explanations that translate science into certainty without arrogance. They know the trap. Sound too confident, and the jury pushes back. Sound too cautious, and doubt creeps in. Balance becomes everything. The suspect watches all of this from a distance, insulated by glass and counsel. His face in court sketches is calm, almost bored, but those who've interviewed him know better. Calm is learned. It's armor. In private moments, his legal team argues strategy, debating whether silence still serves him or if controlled disclosure might soften the fall. The past is no longer a locked room. It's a corridor closing from both ends. Investigators return once more to the victim's last known movements, not because they expect new discoveries, but because repetition reveals cracks. A convenience store clerk from 1996 is tracked down, now retired, living hundreds of miles away. Her memory is imperfect, but one detail remains sharp: the look on the victim's face. Distracted. Rushed. Afraid but not panicked. That distinction matters. Fear without panic suggests recognition. Someone familiar enough to lower defenses, dangerous enough to raise alarms too late. That detail spreads through the team like electricity. Recognition reframes everything. It turns random violence into targeted opportunity. It narrows the field in ways no database ever could. Old social circles are mapped again. Names resurface, some long forgotten, others deliberately ignored in the original investigation. This time, no one is protected by familiarity. The media pressure intensifies. Reporters camp outside buildings, microphones angled like weapons. Every procedural delay becomes a headline. Every sealed motion breeds speculation. The phrase cold case is repeated so often it begins to lose meaning, reduced to branding rather than burden. Inside, the people carrying the case feel the opposite. The weight increases with every retelling. A pretrial hearing exposes the first real fracture. The defense challenges the admissibility of one witness statement, arguing memory contamination after decades of exposure to media narratives. It's a strong argument. The courtroom holds its breath. When the judge allows the statement with limitations, relief is muted. Nothing here feels like victory, only survival. Behind the scenes, an internal review quietly examines the original 1996 investigation. Not for punishment, but for truth. Files reveal shortcuts taken under pressure, assumptions left unchallenged. None of it rises to misconduct, but the accumulation tells a story of a system outrunning its tools. That story will never reach the jury, but it shapes the tone of everything that follows. The victim's family attends these proceedings with a composure that feels almost unreal. Decades of grief have taught them restraint. They listen. They take notes. They hold on to each small advancement like it might disappear if acknowledged too loudly. Closure, they've learned, is not a moment. It's a fragile process. Late one evening, a detective discovers something overlooked in a supplemental report from years ago. A throwaway line. A mention of a smell at the scene, dismissed as irrelevant. Now, paired with witness accounts and suspect history, it gains significance. It doesn't change the case. It deepens it. And depth is what convinces juries when spectacle fails. As the trial date locks in, tension reaches a new pitch. This is no longer about whether the case can be proven. It's about whether truth, delayed and damaged, can still be recognized when it finally stands in the light. The California 1996 cold case has survived time, error, and silence. Now it faces its final test, not against the suspect, but against disbelief itself. The first day of jury selection arrives without ceremony, but the tension is unmistakable. Prospective jurors file in carrying coffee cups and quiet assumptions, unaware that by the end of this process, some of them will carry the weight of a decision that spans nearly 3 decades. The courtroom feels smaller than it should, compressed by history, by expectation, by the unspoken understanding that this is not just another case. Prosecutors watch faces carefully. They are not looking for outrage or sympathy. They are looking for endurance. Cold cases demand patience from juries, an ability to sit with uncertainty, to accept that truth can arrive incomplete yet still be real. Defense attorneys do the same, searching for skepticism, for anyone uncomfortable with science or suspicious of delayed justice. Each side knows this battle begins long before opening statements. Outside, the headlines sharpen. California 1996 cold case solved. The word solved appears again and again, and inside the courthouse, it feels premature. Investigators flinch at it. They know how fragile that word is. They know how easily it can be taken apart by a single unanswered question. The prosecution's opening statement is measured, deliberate. No theatrics. No promises beyond what the evidence can bear. They talk about time as both enemy and witness. About DNA as a language that did not exist when the crime was committed, but speaks clearly now. They introduce the victim not as a symbol, but as a person with routines, habits, unfinished plans. The room grows quiet. This is not spectacle. This is accumulation. The defense responds with restraint of its own. They don't deny the tragedy. They question the certainty. They emphasize gaps, years unaccounted for, evidence handled by people long retired or deceased. They frame the case as a story rebuilt too late, with pieces that may no longer fit. Reasonable doubt becomes their refrain, repeated gently, insistently. As testimony begins, the forensic evidence takes center stage. A lab analyst explains the DNA match, walking the jury through probabilities so small they border on abstraction. Charts appear. Numbers are spoken slowly. The analyst's voice never rises. Confidence here is quiet, anchored in repetition and protocol. Cross-examination tries to rattle that calm, probing for contamination, for human error. It doesn't land the way the defense hopes. Then come the witnesses. Some are sharp, others faded by time, but each carries a fragment of the past into the present. A former neighbor describes sounds heard through thin walls. A coworker recounts a shift that never happened, an alibi that dissolves under scrutiny. Memory falters, corrects itself, falters again. The jury watches closely, learning to separate uncertainty from deception. The suspect sits motionless, eyes forward. His reactions are subtle, almost imperceptible, but they are there. A tightening of the jaw when certain dates are mentioned. A blink that lingers too long when DNA is discussed. None of it is evidence. All of it is human. Midway through the week, the prosecution introduces the gas station footage, enhanced but not transformed. It shows a figure moving through the frame, posture familiar now after months of analysis. An expert explains gait patterns, how bodies carry habits across years. The defense objects, calls it speculative. The judge allows it with caution. The jury leans in. They are not being told what to see. They are being asked to decide whether recognition feels earned. The victim's family takes the stand, not to argue facts, but to describe absence. The chair at the table that never filled again. The birthdays that passed without candles. Their testimony is controlled, restrained, devastating in its simplicity. There is no demand for vengeance, only acknowledgement. The courtroom absorbs it in silence. Behind the scenes, the pressure intensifies. Prosecutors revisit every exhibit nightly, anticipating attacks that haven't come yet. Detectives reread notes, second-guessing decisions made years ago and days ago alike. Sleep becomes optional. The case follows them home, into half-dreams and early mornings. The defense begins to pivot, subtly. They introduce alternative theories without fully committing to them. A different suspect. A coincidence of DNA transfer. A suggestion that the truth is more complex than the prosecution allows. It's a familiar strategy, designed not to convince, but to confuse. Confusion is fertile ground for doubt. One afternoon, a procedural issue halts testimony unexpectedly. A document was disclosed late. Not intentionally, but late enough to matter. The judge pauses proceedings, frustration visible. The delay sends a ripple through the courtroom. Reporters rush to reframe the narrative. Inside, both sides brace. This is how cases unravel, not with explosions, but with technicalities. When testimony resumes, the momentum feels altered. Not broken, but changed. The jury asks more questions now. Thoughtful, precise. They are engaged. That engagement is dangerous for both sides. Engaged jurors notice everything. As the week closes, the prosecution rests. There is no flourish, no final reveal, just a stack of evidence, layered carefully, patiently, over days of testimony. The defense prepares its case, knowing the window is narrowing. Late that night, a detective walks past the evidence room and stops. Inside are boxes labeled with dates that feel unreal now. 1996, 1997. Years that were once present tense. He understands something then that no verdict can change. This case was never just about solving a crime. It was about proving that time does not erase responsibility. The California 1996 cold case has reached the point of no return. Whatever the jury decides, the silence that once surrounded it is gone forever. The truth, incomplete or not, has been spoken aloud. And once spoken, it cannot be put back where it came from. When the defense begins its case, the courtroom feels different, as if the air itself has shifted direction. This is the moment where certainty is challenged not with new facts, but with alternative meanings. The defense doesn't rush. They move carefully, deliberately, aware that speed reads as desperation. Their first witness is not an expert, not a detective, but a reminder. Time changes everything, including truth. They start with procedure. Chain of custody becomes the centerpiece, a quiet attack on confidence. Boxes moved between buildings. Evidence handled by hands no longer here to explain themselves. The defense attorney's voice stays calm as dates and signatures are projected onto the screen, each small discrepancy framed as a fracture. Not enough to shatter the case, but enough to weaken it in the jury's mind. Doubt doesn't need proof. It needs permission. An expert witness follows, speaking about DNA transfer, about how genetic material can travel without intent or violence. Secondary contact. Innocent explanations. The science is real, and that makes it dangerous. Prosecutors listen closely, taking notes, already preparing to dismantle the argument piece by piece. The jury listens too, absorbing complexity, learning that certainty can be bent without being broken. Then the defense introduces memory as its next battleground. A psychologist explains how recollection degrades, how narratives can be reshaped by repetition, media exposure, and suggestion. Witnesses from decades ago, the expert argues, are not lying, they are reconstructing. It's a persuasive point, delivered without accusation. The implication hangs in the air. If memory is unreliable, how much of this case rests on something no longer stable? The prosecution cross-examines sharply but respectfully, forcing the expert to concede limits. Memory fades, yes, but patterns remain. Behavior leaves traces that don't rely on recall. The exchange is tense, technical, difficult to follow in places. Some jurors lean forward. Others look overwhelmed. Complexity cuts both ways. The suspect takes the stand. The room tightens instantly. This is a risk. Everyone knows it. His legal team argued against it for days. Silence had protected him so far. Speech might undo everything. But he insisted. He wants to be seen. He wants to be heard. He speaks evenly, presenting a version of himself untouched by violence. He describes his life in 1996 as ordinary, predictable, unremarkable. Work, home, routine. He denies knowing the victim beyond passing familiarity. He acknowledges the DNA match but offers no explanation beyond coincidence and error. His voice never shakes. That steadiness is either discipline or deceit. On cross-examination, the tone shifts. Prosecutors don't accuse. They clarify. They revisit timelines already established, asking him to confirm details he's already agreed to. Then they introduce small contradictions. A date off by a day. A location misremembered. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to create pressure. The pressure builds slowly. The suspect corrects himself once. Twice. Each correction is logical, reasonable, human. But they accumulate. The prosecutor pauses longer between questions now, letting silence stretch. The suspect fills it. People always do. Then comes the question about the gas station. The footage. The posture. The gait. He dismisses it as vague, unreliable. The prosecutor agrees. Vague footage, he says, can't identify a face. But habits are harder to fake. He asks the suspect to stand, to walk a few steps. The defense objects. The judge allows it. The moment is electric. The suspect rises, moves across the floor. It's ordinary. It's nothing. And yet something in the room shifts. Recognition is not evidence, but it is instinct. Jurors glance at the screen, then back at the man in front of them. No one speaks. The defense redirects quickly, reframing the moment as theater. They emphasize presumption of innocence, the danger of spectacle. The suspect returns to his seat, composed but altered. A line has been crossed, and everyone knows it. As testimony concludes, closing arguments loom. Both sides prepare through the night. Prosecutors refine language, stripping it down to essentials. Defense attorneys do the opposite, expanding doubt, reminding jurors of the cost of being wrong. Justice delayed, they argue, risks becoming justice distorted. Outside the courthouse, the crowd grows. Some hold signs demanding conviction. Others warn against trusting science too much. The case has become symbolic, a referendum on time, technology, and trust. Inside, the jury is insulated from it all, sealed in a room where only evidence matters. Closing arguments arrive without fanfare. The prosecution speaks of patience, of truth revealed not in flashes but in layers. They don't ask the jury to fix the past. They ask them to recognize it. The defense speaks of caution, of the danger in certainty built on fragments. They ask the jury to protect the standard that protects everyone. When the jury files out to deliberate, no one moves. The room stays frozen, as if waiting for something else to happen. Decades of silence have already been broken. Now comes the longest quiet of all. Somewhere deep inside the building, boxes from 1996 sit emptied, their contents finally exposed. Whether that exposure leads to conviction or acquittal, one truth is already settled. The California 1996 cold case is no longer a question mark. It is a confrontation with time itself, and time is no longer on trial. Deliberations begin in a room with no windows, where time feels suspended and every sound is magnified. Chairs scrape softly. Papers shuffle. 12 people sit around a table carrying decades they never lived, but are now responsible for judging. The door closes, and with it, the last barrier between speculation and decision. At first, the conversation is cautious. Jurors review instructions, reminding themselves what they are allowed to consider and what must be left outside the room. No headlines. No courtroom theatrics. Only evidence. Only testimony. The discipline required is immense. Cold cases don't just test memory, they test restraint. They start with the DNA. Numbers are repeated aloud, probabilities spoken slowly, carefully, as if saying them too quickly might make them feel unreal. One juror asks the obvious question, "Can this be wrong?" Another answers with science, citing the expert testimony. A third counters with chain of custody concerns. The discussion circle's not stuck, but thorough. This is not doubt. This is diligence. They move to timelines. Whiteboards fill with arrows and times. Someone notices a gap that once seemed insignificant, now glaring. Another juror fills it with a witness statement. The pieces begin to align, not perfectly, but convincingly. Alignment doesn't mean certainty. It means coherence. The suspect's testimony becomes the room's fault line. Some jurors found him believable, calm, composed. Others saw control masquerading as confidence. The moment he stood and walked is revisited again and again, not as proof, but as presence. Recognition without accusation. Instinct without instruction. They argue about it, aware of its danger, aware of its pull. Hours pass. Food arrives untouched. Fatigue creeps in, dulling edges, sharpening tempers. One juror voices what others have avoided. What if we're wrong? The room quiets. This is the weight of reasonable doubt, no longer theoretical, now personal. Another juror responds, not with certainty, but with responsibility. What if we're right and say no? Back in the courtroom, time stretches differently. Prosecutors sit rigid, reviewing notes they no longer control. Defense attorneys whisper, recalibrating expectations with every passing hour. The victim's family waits in a small room, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. Waiting has become second nature to them. They know how to endure it. Late into the evening, the jury requests clarification on a specific piece of evidence. The judge responds carefully, neutrally. The room exhales, then tightens again. Clarification means focus. Focus means movement. Inside deliberations, the conversation narrows. Alternative theories are tested and discarded, not because they're impossible, but because they lack weight. Coincidence is examined, stretched, then released. At some point, the room recognizes what has been circling all along. This case is not built on one pillar. It stands because many small supports hold it up together. A vote is taken, informal at first. The split is smaller than expected. Discussion resumes, deeper now, less guarded. Jurors speak not as debaters, but as people explaining their reasoning, their hesitation, their thresholds. This is where decisions are actually made, not in votes, but in explanations. The final vote comes quietly. No drama.
No announcement.
Just pens moving on paper. When the foreperson presses the button to summon the court, the sound echoes louder than it should. The door opens. The hallway holds its breath. Everyone stands as the jury files back in. The suspect watches their faces, searching for clues, finding none. Years of avoidance have taught him how to read rooms, but this one gives nothing away. The foreperson's hands tremble slightly as the paper is passed forward. The verdict is read. The words land without echo, heavy and final. A ripple moves through the room, subtle but unmistakable. The victim's family closes their eyes, not in celebration, but in release. The prosecution exhales for the first time in days. The defense nods once, already shifting to the next phase. The suspect remains still, as if motion might confirm what has just happened. Sentencing is scheduled for a later date. Appeals are mentioned. Process resumes. The machinery of justice grinds forward, indifferent to emotion. But something irreversible has occurred. The past has been named. Outside, cameras flash. Reporters speak rapidly, summarizing decades in seconds. The phrase cold case is repeated again, but now it sounds different. Warmer. Heavier. Altered by consequence. That night, a detective drives home through streets that look unchanged, familiar, deceptively calm. He realizes the case will follow him anyway, not as unfinished business, but as proof. Proof that silence can be broken. Proof that time delays but does not absolve. The California 1996 cold case has reached a verdict, but the story is not complete. Verdicts close cases. They do not close wounds. What remains now is aftermath, the quieter, harder part, where truth settles into lives already shaped by its absence, and nothing will ever quite fit the way it did before. The days between verdict and sentencing stretch longer than the years that preceded them. Time, once an accomplice to silence, now feels exposed, slowed to a crawl where every hour demands meaning. Inside the courthouse, routines resume, but no one pretends this is routine. The California 1996 cold case has shifted from question to consequence. The defendant is transferred to a holding facility, processed like any other convicted felon, yet treated with a caution reserved for those whose cases draw attention. Paperwork replaces speculation. Fingerprints are taken again, as if repetition might reinforce reality. In his cell, the noise of the facility never fully quiets. Doors slam. Voices echo. Sleep arrives in fragments. The past, long kept at bay, now has nowhere else to go. The defense files motions immediately. Appeals are outlined, arguments drafted with surgical precision. They challenge jury instructions, evidentiary rulings, the admission of expert testimony. It's expected, necessary even. The system demands resistance to prove it can withstand it. Prosecutors respond methodically, not with triumph, but with patience. Winning a verdict is not the end. It's the beginning of defense against undoing it. For the victim's family, the verdict brings an unfamiliar sensation: stillness. Not peace. Not closure. Stillness. The phone stops ringing. The interviews pause. Friends and strangers alike step back, assuming the work of grief is complete. It isn't. Grief doesn't recognize legal milestones. It adjusts cautiously to new facts. They revisit memories now reframed by truth. Ordinary moments acquire edges. A laugh recalled now echoes differently. A last conversation replays with altered emphasis. The absence remains, but its shape changes. It has a cause now. A name. That knowledge comforts and wounds in equal measure. Investigators begin the quiet process of review. Not celebration. Reflection. They document what worked, what didn't, what could be done differently next time. Cold cases are teachers, but their lessons are expensive. Every solved case carries with it dozens that remain untouched, waiting for resources, for attention, for someone willing to reopen old doors. Media coverage shifts tone. The urgency fades, replaced by analysis. Long-form articles dissect the trial, the science, the decades of delay. Commentators debate whether justice delayed can truly be justice served. There are no conclusions, only opinions. Inside the department, the debate feels distant. They live with outcomes, not arguments. Sentencing day arrives with less spectacle than the verdict, but greater gravity. The courtroom fills again, quieter this time. The judge reviews the pre-sentence report, detailing a life now reduced to bullet points, employment history, family ties, psychological evaluations. The human complexity feels out of place, almost intrusive, but necessary. Justice, to be just, must account for more than guilt. Victim impact statements are read. Voices tremble, then steady. They speak not of hatred, but of years lost to uncertainty. Of birthdays marked by questions. Of the damage caused not only by the crime but by the waiting. The room listens. Even the defendant listens, though his expression reveals little. Some reckonings are internal, invisible by design. The sentence is pronounced. Lengthy. Definitive. The words carry weight, but not relief. There is no moment of triumph, no sense of completion. Just acknowledgement. The law has spoken. The record is set. As the defendant is led away, cameras capture the image, freezing it into a symbol. For some, it represents accountability. For others, it's a reminder of time lost. Symbols simplify. Reality doesn't. In the weeks that follow, life resumes unevenly. Detectives return to other cases, though this one lingers in conversations, in pauses, in the way certain files are handled with extra care. The lab continues its work, processing samples that might one day rewrite another forgotten narrative. The wheel keeps turning. One evening, a junior investigator asks a veteran what it feels like to finally close a case like that. The answer is quiet, unromantic. It doesn't close, he says. It settles. There's a difference. The California 1996 cold case is now part of history, cited in training manuals, referenced in conferences, held up as proof of progress. But for those who lived inside it, it remains something else entirely, a reminder that truth can survive neglect, that silence is not the same as resolution, and that every unanswered question leaves a shadow. As night falls, the city looks unchanged. Streets glow under familiar lights. People move on with their lives, unaware of the weight recently lifted from one small corner of the past. The case is over on paper. In memory, it has only just begun to take its final shape. After sentencing, the courthouse empties more quickly than anyone expects. There is no final scene, no lingering confrontation, just the quiet efficiency of a system moving on to its next obligation. Chairs are stacked. Files are boxed. The California 1996 cold case, once the center of every conversation, becomes a closed tab on a crowded desktop. But closure in paperwork does not translate to silence in the mind. Inside the department, the case leaves a residue. Detectives catch themselves referencing it unconsciously, comparing new leads to old mistakes, new assumptions to past blind spots. The solved cold case becomes a mirror, forcing everyone to look at how easily certainty can mislead, how long truth can wait when no one is equipped to hear it. This is the part no headline covers. The forensic lab conducts a post-case audit, not out of suspicion but discipline. Every step is retraced, every protocol reviewed. The DNA breakthrough that unlocked the case is now studied as a model, but also as a warning. Technology is only as powerful as the patients behind it. Samples from other unsolved cases are queued, each one carrying the possibility of awakening another long-silent story. The lead detective returns to the victim's original file one last time. Not to search for errors, but to understand the arc of it. Early notes are filled with urgency, with certainty that answers were close. Later entries thin out, replaced by procedural language, then long gaps. He sees now how time reshaped the investigation, how hope slowly transformed into maintenance. This isn't failure. It's reality. But reality, he knows now, must be challenged regularly. The victim's family navigates a different aftermath. With the legal process complete, attention fades, leaving them alone with a truth they asked for but never rehearsed. Conversations change. When people ask how they're doing, the question feels heavier than before. There is no simple answer. Justice has arrived, but it hasn't erased absence. It has only given it a name. They visit the grave together, standing in a quiet line, the world continuing around them without pause. They don't talk much. Words feel unnecessary. What matters is that the silence now feels different. It's no longer full of questions. It's full of memory. The convicted man begins his life inside the system, stripped of narrative, reduced to routine. Intake forms, assigned numbers, regulated movement. The notoriety of the case follows him briefly, then fades as new arrivals take focus. Inside, time resumes its original role, not as an accomplice, but as a sentence. Nights are long, days indistinguishable. The past becomes unavoidable, replayed without interruption. Appeals progress slowly, predictably. Courts respond with measured language, reaffirming rulings, citing precedent. Each denial tightens the finality of the outcome. The law is not emotional. It does not revisit pain. It only verifies process. For the defense, the fight becomes procedural endurance. For the prosecution, vigilance replaces urgency. Beyond the legal sphere, the case begins to influence policy. Funding proposals reference it. Training sessions dissect it. Young investigators hear it recounted as a lesson in persistence and humility. The phrase cold case regains its weight, no longer shorthand for failure, but for patience. Patience backed by evolution. Media attention drifts elsewhere, as it always does. New crimes. New controversies. The story that once dominated cycles is archived, searchable but no longer summoned. The public moves on, unaware of how close so many other stories remain to resurfacing, waiting for the right moment, the right tool, the right question. Late one evening, the detective receives an email from a department in another state. They've been re-examining an old case, inspired by the California breakthrough. There's a DNA hit. Preliminary. Unconfirmed. But promising. He reads the message twice, then once more. The work, he realizes, is recursive. One solved case doesn't end a chapter. It opens several more. He shuts down his computer and sits in the dark for a moment, listening to the building settle. He thinks about how many times he walked these halls believing the case would never move again. How wrong that belief turned out to be. The lesson lingers. Certainty is temporary. Silence is negotiable. As the years continue forward, the California 1996 cold case settles into its final form, not as a mystery, not as a headline, but as a marker. A point in time where the past reached forward and was finally met. It does not glow. It does not resolve everything it touches. But it stands as proof that even the quietest truths can be loud enough, if given enough time and someone willing to listen. The story is no longer being told aloud every day, but it exists now in a different way, woven into the fabric of how justice is understood. Not perfect, not complete, but alive and acknowledged at last. Years later, the case still resurfaces in unexpected places. Not in headlines anymore, not in urgent alerts, but in quieter rooms where decisions are shaped before they're named. A training seminar, a budget meeting, a late-night conversation between detectives who understand that time is never neutral. The California 1996 cold case has become a reference point, a cautionary tale, a proof of concept, depending on who's speaking and why. In the department's records room, the boxes are sealed and labeled, their contents preserved in a final configuration that will not change again. Evidence is no longer moved, no longer tested, no longer argued over. It rests now, inert, its purpose fulfilled. And yet, for those who once handled it daily, the case feels strangely unfinished, not because justice failed, but because justice arrived carrying consequences no one had fully prepared for. The lead detective retires quietly, without ceremony. On his last day, he walks the halls one final time, passing offices filled with younger faces, newer cases, fresher urgency. He stops outside the evidence room and listens to the hum of the building, the sound of systems doing what systems do, processing, storing, waiting. He understands now that waiting is not the enemy. Forgetting is. He leaves behind notes, not official memos, but observations. Small things. Reminders. Question certainty. Revisit assumptions. Silence doesn't mean absence. These notes are not policy. They're philosophy. Whether anyone reads them is out of his control. He's learned to accept that. The victim's family continues forward in fits and starts, discovering that life after answers is still life, complicated and uneven. They mark anniversaries differently now. Some dates feel lighter, others heavier. They speak the victim's name more often, no longer worried that doing so will invite only questions. The story has an ending now, even if it's not the one they would have chosen. They donate a box of old letters to an archive, personal artifacts that once felt too private to share. The archivist handles them carefully, recognizing their value not as evidence, but as context. History isn't just built from crimes and verdicts. It's built from what people carry while they wait for truth to arrive. Inside the prison system, the convicted man fades into anonymity. The notoriety that once followed him evaporates, replaced by routine. Days repeat. Nights stretch. Appeals thin out and fail. He writes letters that go unanswered, drafts explanations no one asks for. Time, which once protected him, now confines him. The symmetry is not poetic. It's procedural. Cold case units across the country expand, fueled by funding and faith in technology. Databases grow. Algorithms refine. DNA genealogy opens doors no one imagined in 1996. Each success story echoes the California case, reinforcing the belief that the past is accessible if approached correctly. But with that belief comes pressure. Expectations rise. Families wait, watching clocks that feel familiar. Not every case will be solved. This truth remains stubborn, immune to optimism. For every breakthrough, dozens of files sit untouched, their evidence degraded beyond use, their witnesses gone, their stories incomplete. Investigators know this. They carry it with them, a quiet balance against the celebration of progress. Solving one case does not redeem the unsolved. It simply reminds everyone what's possible and what still isn't. A journalist writes a retrospective years later, careful not to sensationalize, careful not to simplify. They interview those willing to speak and those who won't. The article doesn't go viral. It doesn't need to. It's read by people who understand that some stories are meant to be absorbed slowly. In its final paragraph, the journalist writes that the case was never really cold. It was dormant, waiting for a future that could hear it. In classrooms, law students debate the ethics of delayed justice. Philosophers argue about responsibility across time. Scientists discuss the limits of certainty. The case becomes an example, stripped of faces, reduced to variables. This abstraction is necessary but incomplete. Somewhere inside every discussion, the human cost remains, resisting compression. On an ordinary evening, a detective working a different case opens a file and pauses. The pattern feels familiar. Too familiar. He doesn't say it out loud, but the memory is there, guiding his questions, slowing his conclusions. He orders a test he might have skipped years earlier. It's a small decision, invisible to anyone else. This is how influence works, not in grand gestures, but in quiet changes of behavior. The California 1996 cold case no longer needs defending. It has withstood scrutiny, appeals, reinterpretation. Its place is fixed. What remains fluid is its meaning. To some, it's proof that justice can outrun time. To others, it's evidence of how easily time can win. Both interpretations are true. That contradiction is not a flaw. It's the lesson. As night settles over the city that once held its breath for a verdict, lights blink on apartments, cars move through intersections, conversations continue without reference to what happened decades ago. Life does not pause to acknowledge justice. It incorporates it unevenly, imperfectly. The story ends not with resolution, but with continuity. The case is solved. The questions it raised are not. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the true legacy of the California 1996 cold case is not that it found an answer, but that it changed the way people listen, to evidence, to silence, to time itself. Because somewhere, in a file not yet opened, another story is waiting. And now, there are people willing to hear it. Long after the echoes of the trial fade, the case continues to surface in subtler ways, like a low-frequency hum beneath ordinary life. It appears in hesitations before decisions, in questions asked 1 second longer than necessary, in the refusal to accept easy answers. The California 1996 cold case has completed its legal journey, but its psychological one keeps moving, threading through people who never expected to carry it. In the department, a new generation of investigators studies the file not as history, but as terrain. They trace the arc from confusion to clarity, from assumption to verification. They note the moments where certainty stalled progress, and the moments where humility reopened it. In briefings, the case is cited without drama. Just facts. Just lessons. The most important one is never written on the slide. Time is not an excuse. It is a condition. The forensic lab installs new equipment, faster, more precise, capable of extracting meaning from fragments once considered useless. A technician remembers the night the 1996 profile finally lit up on a screen, the quiet disbelief that followed, the sense that the past had reached through glass and touched the present. That memory sharpens her focus now. She treats every sample like it might be the one that wakes another sleeping case. For the victim's family, the world settles into a different rhythm. The questions that once dominated every gathering no longer lead the conversation. Instead, stories return, small, human details that were crowded out by uncertainty for years. The victim becomes more than the last day, more than the headline. This is not closure. It's restoration, partial and fragile, but real. They create a scholarship in the victim's name, modest and quiet. No press conference.
No speeches.
Just a line item that will help someone move forward. It feels appropriate. Forward is the direction they choose now, not because the past has loosened its grip, but because it finally stopped pulling them backward. Inside prison walls, the convicted man's world narrows further. The appeal window closes. The language shifts from pending to final. Routine calcifies into permanence. He marks time with small rituals, habits formed to survive repetition. The case that once defined him publicly dissolves into anonymity. Among thousands of others, his story is no longer special. The system absorbs him the way it absorbs everything else. Across the country, cold case units quietly expand their reach. Funding trickles in. Databases merge. Old evidence is pulled from shelves, handled with care, tested with hope tempered by realism. Families are contacted cautiously, warned not to expect miracles. Some calls lead nowhere. Others reopen doors that never fully closed. Progress is uneven. Always has been. The California case is referenced less frequently now, replaced by newer successes, newer failures. That's how it should be. Its purpose was never to stand alone, but to prove that standing still was optional. That truth spreads not through headlines, but through changed behavior. One evening, years later, a former juror receives a letter from a stranger. It's brief. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for listening. No name. No return address. The juror reads it twice, then places it in a drawer. They remember the weight of deliberation, the responsibility that felt almost unbearable. They realized they were part of something larger than a verdict. They were part of a moment where the past was finally heard. The city where it all began continues to evolve. Buildings rise where empty lots once stood. Streets are renamed. People come and go, unaware of what unfolded decades earlier. The physical markers fade, but the record remains, stored in archives, in databases, in the collective memory of institutions that learned, slowly, how to listen better. In quiet offices late at night, detectives still confront unanswered questions. Not from this case, but from others like it. The California 1996 cold case does not promise resolution. It offers permission to revisit, to doubt, to persist. That permission matters more than certainty ever did. As time moves forward, the language around cold cases changes. They are no longer framed as failures frozen in time, but as conversations paused mid-sentence. Some will never resume. Others will, unexpectedly, when conditions align. Justice, it turns out, is less about speed than alignment, of tools, of will, of attention. The story, when told now, is quieter, more careful, less interested in triumph. That restraint is earned. It reflects an understanding that every solved case casts a shadow over those that remain unsolved, and that progress must coexist with humility. The California 1996 cold case has reached its final form, not as a headline, not as a symbol, but as a signal. A signal that silence can be temporary, that evidence can wait, that truth does not expire, even when memories do. And somewhere, in a box still sealed, in a file still untouched, another story waits in the dark, patient and unresolved. The difference now is simple and profound. There are people listening. Years pass, and the case stops being a headline and starts becoming a reference point, a quiet benchmark whispered in hallways and training rooms, mentioned without embellishment, without emotion, like a scar everyone knows not to touch but never forgets. The California 1996 cold case, solved by DNA, is no longer shocking news, yet its aftershock continues to ripple outward, subtle but persistent, reshaping how absence, time, and truth are understood. In one small office lined with aging filing cabinets, a detective nearing retirement opens a drawer he hasn't touched in months. Inside are photographs from other cases, other victims, other unanswered questions. He pauses, fingers hovering over a manila folder, remembering how close this one came to joining them forever. He remembers the years when the case felt dead, when the evidence seemed mute, when the idea of resolution felt almost naive. That memory keeps him working a little longer each evening, chasing details that once would have been dismissed as noise. Across the state, a mother answers a phone call she never expected. Her brother vanished in the early 2000s.
No body.
No suspect. Just a story that dissolved into rumor. The voice on the other end is careful, restrained, trained not to promise anything. New testing methods. Old evidence. A possibility. The call does not bring relief. It brings tension, a tightening of the chest that feels strangely familiar. Hope, she realizes, can be heavier than despair. In courtrooms, prosecutors adjust their language. They speak less in absolutes, more in probabilities anchored by science. Juries listen differently now. DNA is no longer magic, no longer a cinematic reveal. It is a tool, powerful but imperfect, demanding context and caution. The California case taught that lesson publicly. It reminded everyone that evidence does not speak alone. It must be interpreted, questioned, understood. The victim's name continues to appear in databases, in footnotes, in training materials. Not as a tragedy, but as a turning point. Recruits read the file and noticed the gaps, the years where nothing happened, the silence mistaken for failure. Instructors emphasize that silence can mean waiting, not quitting. That distinction changes how young investigators approach their work. They learn patience without surrender. Some nights, the original lead detective still dreams of the case. Not the crime itself, but the moment of confirmation, the quiet room, the screen glowing with a match that rewrote history. In the dream, time folds in on itself. The past and present coexist. He wakes unsettled but grateful, reminded that answers can arrive when vigilance is maintained, even if hope has thinned. The community, once fractured by fear and suspicion, has learned to carry the story differently. It no longer dominates conversation, but it surfaces in moments of reflection, during anniversaries, in classrooms where students study justice not as theory, but as lived experience. Teachers speak about the case as an example of persistence, of systems evolving, of truth delayed but not denied. Media coverage fades, replaced by newer crises, louder scandals. That, too, is part of the cycle. Yet occasionally, a long-form article appears, revisiting the case with restraint, focusing not on spectacle but on process. Readers respond quietly. No outrage. No shock. Just recognition. This is what progress looks like when it's earned slowly. In labs, technicians continue refining methods, extracting meaning from fragments once dismissed as contamination. Every successful identification carries the weight of the California case behind it, proof that the smallest trace can outlast decades. Each solved case reaffirms a simple, unsettling idea. The past is never truly sealed. For the families still waiting, the story cuts both ways. It offers hope, but also impatience. If one case could be solved after so long, why not theirs? That question fuels letters, petitions, phone calls. Some are answered. Many are not. Justice remains uneven, imperfect, human. The convicted man's name recedes further into obscurity. Appeals denied. Interviews declined. His version of events fades as the record solidifies. History, once contested, begins to harden. The case is no longer about him. It never really was. What remains is the echo, a reminder that certainty is fragile, that conclusions must remain open to challenge, that time can be an ally as much as an enemy. The California 1996 cold case does not promise redemption. It offers responsibility. And somewhere, in a town not yet famous, in a file not yet reopened, another case sits quietly, waiting for the moment when science, persistence, and courage align again. The lesson endures, unspoken but understood. Nothing is truly over until the evidence says so. Time does not close cases. It only changes the way they are carried. The California 1996 cold case, solved by DNA, now exists in a strange afterlife, no longer active, no longer silent, suspended between memory and warning. Its resolution did not end a story. It exposed how many stories were still unfinished. In police departments across the country, the case becomes a quiet reference during late-night conversations, spoken in lowered voices between officers leaning against metal desks, coffee gone cold. Someone always says the same thing. We thought it was impossible. And someone else always answers. Until it wasn't. That exchange reshapes expectations in subtle ways. Evidence rooms are revisited. Old boxes are relabeled. Forgotten envelopes are logged again. Not because anyone believes they will suddenly speak, but because now, no one dares to assume they never will. In a suburban home not far from the original crime scene, the victim's younger cousin stands in a hallway staring at a framed photograph that once felt like a relic. For years, it was a symbol of loss frozen in time. Now it feels altered, charged with motion, as if the person inside it had traveled through decades to reach the present. Closure, she realizes, is not a door that shuts. It is a window that stays open, letting air in, sometimes too much. Therapists who work with families of long-term victims notice a pattern after high-profile cold cases are solved. Grief reactivates. Old wounds reopen with unfamiliar shapes. Some family members feel anger where they expected peace. Others feel guilt for moments of happiness they experienced while the truth was still buried. The California case becomes a case study not just in forensic science, but in emotional fallout. In universities, criminal justice students analyze the timeline, the missed connections, the technological limits of the 1990s. They debate responsibility without accusing individuals. The consensus is unsettling. The system did what it could with what it had. That truth offers no comfort. It only reinforces how dependent justice is on the tools of its time. Late one evening, an evidence technician alone in a lab scrolls through digital archives, comparing profiles, letting algorithms do what human memory cannot. She pauses when a partial match appears, faint but statistically significant. It doesn't belong to this case. It belongs to another. But her mind flashes back to California, to the headlines, to the astonishment that followed. She flags the result, sends an email. The cycle begins again. The solved case changes how prosecutors approach old convictions. Files, once considered airtight, are reopened, not out of doubt, but out of respect for uncertainty. DNA, once a weapon of accusation, becomes a tool of verification. Some convictions are strengthened, others fracture. Truth, it turns out, is not loyal to either side. The community where the crime occurred still carries its own scars. There are houses that have changed owners multiple times, streets renamed, landmarks erased. Yet older residents remember exactly where they were when the news broke in 1996, and again when it broke decades later. two shocks separated by a lifetime. One created fear, the other forced reflection. In interviews, younger reporters ask veterans how it felt to cover a case that vanished and then returned. The answer is always hesitant. They speak about restraint, about learning when to step back, about the weight of writing words that may outlive their accuracy. The solved cold case becomes a reminder that journalism, like justice, leaves footprints that cannot be erased. Some nights, the victim's sibling wakes up convinced they heard a voice calling their name, a sound remembered from childhood. The mind, freed from uncertainty, begins to reconstruct presence. Memory fills gaps that truth has finally exposed. Sleep becomes lighter. Dreams become sharper. Healing, it seems, does not move in a straight line. The file itself, now officially closed, sits on a shelf with a final stamp across its cover. But even closed files are never sealed. They are accessed by interns, cited by scholars, referenced by advocates pushing for funding, reform, patience. The case no longer belongs to one department or one family. It belongs to a system still learning how to listen to the past. And somewhere, in a storage facility humming quietly beneath fluorescent lights, thousands of untested samples wait in silence. They are not evidence yet. They are possibilities. The California 1996 cold case proved that possibility has a long memory. The lesson lingers, heavy and undeniable. Time does not forgive, does not forget, does not erase. It only waits. Silence settles differently after truth has been named. It is no longer the hollow quiet of not knowing. It is a dense, weighted stillness, like air before a storm that already passed but never truly moved on. In the wake of the California 1996 cold case resolution, that silence spreads outward, touching places far beyond the original crime scene, seeping into offices, homes, courtrooms, and archives where other names wait without answers. Inside a county records building, an archivist runs a finger along spines of binders dated in fading ink. 1993, 94, 96. The years blur. Each binder holds a version of hope that once felt urgent and then slowly cooled. After the DNA breakthrough, the archivist notices a change in posture among visitors. They stand straighter. They ask different questions. Not if something can be done, but when. Detectives who worked the case in their early careers now sit behind desks worn smooth by decades of paperwork. Some are close to retirement. Some stayed too long because leaving felt like abandonment. They speak carefully about the solved case, aware that every word will be interpreted as a promise. They avoid that. They talk instead about patience, about the discipline of waiting without forgetting. In a quiet courtroom, a judge reviews motions connected to unrelated cases, but the California file lingers in her thoughts. She remembers sentencing hearings where certainty felt absolute. Now certainty feels provisional. She reads slower. She asks for corroboration. Justice, she knows now, is strongest when it doubts itself just enough. The perpetrator's confession, once it surfaced, did not arrive with drama. No shouting. No cinematic breakdown. Just words placed in order, factual, restrained, devastating in their simplicity. Those words circulate in training seminars, stripped of names, reduced to structure. Instructors pause on certain sentences, pointing out how memory can fossilize lies, how time can polish them until they sound like truth. Across town, a journalist revisits old notebooks. Margins filled with question marks. Lines underlined twice. Names followed by arrows pointing nowhere. She realizes that some of her earliest instincts were right, buried beneath louder narratives and editorial caution. The solved cold case does not validate her. It humbles her. Being close was not the same as being correct. In living rooms across the state, viewers watch documentaries that compress decades into an hour. They feel shock, then satisfaction, then something less defined. A discomfort that lingers after the credits roll. The sense that resolution did not come soon enough, and that it arrived too late to matter for someone who mattered. The victim's mother, now older than she ever imagined she would be without answers, listens to the word solved as if it belongs to another language. For her, The case did not end. It transformed. The ache she carried has changed shape. It no longer asks questions. It remembers. There are nights when former suspects, cleared long ago but never fully released from suspicion, wake suddenly, breath sharp, hearts racing. The announcement of the true perpetrator did not erase the years they spent under a shadow. Vindication is quieter than accusation. It rarely makes headlines. Law enforcement agencies begin to speak openly about backlog, about kits never tested, about funding delayed by politics and priorities. The California case becomes a line item in budget proposals, a talking point in hearings. Some find that uncomfortable, a tragedy repurposed as leverage. Others argue it is necessary. Memory must be made useful, or it will be wasted. In forensic labs, technicians recalibrate machines, double-check protocols, rerun controls. Precision becomes ritual. No one wants to be the reason another truth waits decades. The hum of equipment sounds different now. Less mechanical, more watchful. The solved cold case also changes how communities talk about safety. Old warnings resurface. Parents recall rules they enforced in fear, then relaxed with time. Now those memories return, sharpened. Not to terrify, but to remind. Normalcy, they realize, is not proof of safety. It is only a pause. A retired detective drives past the original location one afternoon, unplanned, almost against his will. The building is gone. Something new stands there, glass and steel, anonymous. He pulls over anyway. Sits. Breathes. He thinks about all the versions of himself who stood there before, younger, certain, wrong. He does not feel regret. He feels relief edged with sorrow. The case file, digitized now, travels faster than it ever did on paper. It is accessed by students in other countries, by researchers tracing patterns, by families searching for hope. It becomes a beacon and a burden. Proof that answers can come. Reminder that most have not. And beneath it all, a quiet truth settles in. Solving one cold case does not warm the others. But it changes the temperature of belief. It tells the waiting that they are not invisible. It tells the past that it is still being watched.